And you worked on the original computer in this country, right?
I was very fortunate. The Navy ordered me to the first big computer in the United States, Mark I at Harvard.
Now, in those days, the thing was...
51 feet long, 8 feet high, and 8 feet deep.
And that was the pocket model.
That's right. You could put it on a little tiny corner of a chip now.
Yeah. Now, how did you know so much about computers then?
I didn't.
How did
I was the first one.
Yeah.
When the first computers were invented, they lacked the universal language and were devoid of the ability to communicate with each other. It wasn't until Grace Hopper that the function of computers was expanded by running on a universal, English-based computer language. Hopper was a tiny New York City girl during the early 20th century who constantly thought outside of the box. Relentless in her pursuit of curiosity, her analytic, scientific, and inquisitive mind propelled her to become a pioneer and leader who unapologetically broke the computer language barrier.
I'd never seen an 80-year-old admiral before. That was pretty interesting. Or an 80-year-old admiral who sat there knitting while the president of the university is introducing her. And then when she got up, she had this incredibly powerful voice and was full of humor. And then she was talking about the future, where here's a woman who's the same age as my grandmother, and she's explaining these technological futures that I can't even imagine as a 14-year-old.
In 1906, Grace Hopper was born in New York City, where she grew up as a curious child who deconstructed 7 of her family's clocks to observe how they functioned. Hopper graduated from Vassar College and later obtained a PhD in mathematics at Yale University. At the beginning of World War II, Hopper applied for the Navy but was denied because she did not fit the standards, being considered overage, underweight, and overeducated. Instead of quitting, Hopper obtained the waiver for the weight requirement and joined the Naval Reserve at 37. As her first assignment from the Naval Reserve, Hopper was assigned to the Bureau of Ordnance Computation Project at Harvard University to program Mark I, the world's first programmable digital computer. With no background in computer programming, Hopper spent countless hours analyzing the blueprints of Mark I and wrote the world's first computer programming manual, which later became the fundamental operating principles of computer machines. Grace Hopper broke the language barrier in computer programming by developing the world's first compilers that translated English into a language that computers could understand. Machine languages were abstract and nonsensical, consisting of long strings of zeros and ones, each representing a phrase or a number. Each computer had its own language, preventing communication with other computers. Writing a program took several weeks because the switches and cables had to be arranged after the code was written on paper, making it prone to error. These tedious steps in using computers were only understood by small groups of highly trained mathematicians or engineers. In 1949, Grace left Harvard and joined the Eckert-Mauchly Computer Company, later Remington Rand, to work on UNIVAC, the world's first commercially produced digital computer. They had a vision that computers would be used for much more than computations. She thought of the idea of a compiler. Her first compiler, A0, translated mathematical symbols into binary, making them understandable to computers. Her compilers became more advanced in 1955, with the introduction of the B0 compiler being able to translate English statements. These compilers had a library to which the letters or numbers would be directed to, accessing the binary symbols representing each character. The B0 compiler later evolved into Flowmatic, the world's first computer language that is entirely based on English. Programming gradually became easier and quicker, requiring less human labor. Over time, UNIVAC gained fame for solving real-life problems. Soon, people were inspired by the successes of UNIVAC and began developing more English-based computer languages. Although Grace Hopper made tremendous advances in computing during the 1950s, World War II was the start of a very opportune time for her career and innovations. Faced with different obstacles in the war, the U.S. government emerged as the biggest supporter and consumer of computers. Without World War II, Grace would not have been allowed to join the Navy, nor the prestigious Mark I team at Harvard, which was previously exclusive to males. At Harvard, Grace learned about how computers worked under Howard Aiken, the original concept designer of the modern computer. Initially, only having a background in mathematics posed some challenges for Hopper when it came to coding computers, but she implemented her math skills of problem solving and logical thinking into understanding the complicated process of programming, resulting in the emergence of her compilers, which became the foundation of all modern computer languages. Her compilers went through many iterations before being perfected. The first version, the A0 compiler, made computers run very slowly. The second version, the B0 compiler, also had limitations. It could process only a handful of commands in English, which did not seem enough to process the voluminous U.S. Census data, which was the main task of UNIVAC. The B0 compiler was met with strong resistance because people believed that computers only understood arithmetic, not English words. They also did not like anyone writing programs nor losing their high priest prestige. By talking in conferences and explaining the advantages of her compiler, Hopper's work was finally accepted as viable after 4 years. Though voiceless, Grace had to fight gender stereotypes too. One of 2 other female colleagues, Ruth Brendel, noticed Howard Aiken and the other male colleagues' harsh attitudes toward Hopper and her work. Her male co-workers at Harvard drew straws to decide who would sit next to her because nobody wanted to. She also lied to others that her husband had died during World War II in order to hide her divorce and wore her wedding ring all throughout her life. To cope with her stress, she depended on alcohol. One night at her new job, she wound up in jail for drunk and disorderly conduct. With support and help from her colleagues Ruth Brendel and Edmund Berkeley from Harvard, she was able to stop drinking excessively. After retiring from the Navy in 1966, Hopper lectured at universities and spoke at conferences, educating future computer scientists to spread her inventions and ideas. In 1967, Grace was recalled back to the Navy to standardize multiple languages used throughout the Navy. Using the most widely used computer language in business, COBOL, that grew out of Flowmatic, Grace not only provided the Navy with one standard computer language, but also established the international standards of computer languages and systems. She popularized this new invention, making it the most extensively used computer language in the world. At 79, she retired as a Rear Admiral and the oldest serving officer in the Navy. Hopper valued the teachings of computer technology, feeling the need to inspire the next generations until she passed away in 1992.
Amazing Grace was committed to making the language of computer programming more universal. Today, we honor her contributions to computer science and the sense of possibility she inspired in generations of young people.
She was very pragmatic, and she was very interested in making coding something that was accessible to a much broader range of people than it had been in the past.
Students, more than ever, are gaining access to software due to the coherence of Grace Hopper's compilers. Ironically, the very reason for creating compilers adversely affects us today. Due to the convenience of software, it may pose a danger to the security of present-day computer users. Software networks connect to vast supply chains, leaving data vulnerable to harmful programmers and analysts. What people do with this constant improvement of technology is decided by humankind itself. Just as Grace Hopper did, one should take chances and open their mind to the possibilities outside the limitations set by society, and take responsibility for expressing those ideas for higher purposes.
I also hope you'll all be good ships, and I'll give you a motto. A ship in port is safe, but that is not what ships are built for. So just remember, it's frequently much easier to apologize than it is to get permission. Do it. We've got to move forward. We're going to have to count on our young people to do it. Because we've got to move into the world of the future. And we can't afford to say, but we've always done it that way.